The Book of the Damned by Charles Fort. Part 1. You are listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons and monsters and serpents. This is Brothers of the Serpent podcast, and we are coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, where we are nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Edwards Plateau. So I think we got a good show for you guys. We're starting a new book report, The Book of the Damned. By Charles Fort, and I've been going through, taking notes, making marks, and I don't know. I think this is going to be a lot of fun.
This is the origin of the term Fortian.
That's right. That's right.
Fortian phenomena.
Yeah. Yep, that's right. So it's been making me laugh. I think this dude was a snake bro, but we'll get into that. Charles Fort was one of the early snake bros. Couple of announcements. The Egypt tour, the November 2022 Egypt tour with Ben from Uncharted X, Kyle and I from Brothers of the Serpent, and Darren and Graham from Grimerica. The registration is now open for people who were on the waiting list or Patreons of the various podcasts. So if you're a Patreon for Ben or a Patreon for Grimerica or us, you should check your Patreon messages in your email. Because you should have gotten a notification from one of us, or all of us, if you Patreon supporter for all of us, with information on how to register. And I think Ben says we're going to open up the registration to everybody on Sunday or sometime next week. So that's going to be great. Even
if you can't go to Egypt, you should still check your Patreon messages.
That's right. Right. Check your Patreon message. If you're a Patreon of Brothers of the Serpent, check those messages because you may have gotten a message from us about something else. So please do that. And let's see, what else do we have? Oh, yes, there is going to be an enormous update to the podcast feed coming up very soon. I've been sacrificing a lot of video game time to work on this. So I just hope you guys appreciate it. I think it's going to be great. And so this show should be the last one that we post using the old system. So sometime between this episode coming out and next episode, I should be doing the changeover, and hopefully nothing goes terribly wrong.
Hopefully it will be seamless and you won't even notice.
You won't even notice. Well,
except that download speeds will probably get way faster.
Yeah. Well, you should notice that things have changed, but hopefully there won't be enormous problems. And of course, once the changeover happens, I'll let you guys know. And if there are problems, I would like to hear about them. So you could email us, brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com, if you notice issues. But this should fix a lot of just, little problems that our feed has currently. I think it's going to be great. So look forward to that. And what else? There's something else we had to?
Probably, but let's just move on. We got
a bunch of one-up boxes, yes.
If there's something else, we'll come up with it later.
Right. All right, let's do this first one. This is the long-awaited one-up box from Oanis in the Discord. Chuck has been he's been to the Scablands with us, so we've met him in person. And Chuck is a geologist, and he decided that Kyle and I don't know what we're talking about when we're talking about core drilling in stone. So he sent us a package with actual core drills, modern core drills. There's a small one and a large one. What does it say here? It says speed 500 to 800 RPM, submerge in water, use constant flow, use drill press in preference to handheld tools. But let's see, there's a note here. Greetings! It is about time that you two should gain some actual experience in drilling through stone. In this box, I have provided you with enough to get you started. There is a small slab of stone that is pretty close to granite. I have drilled into it, so no excuses. It can be done easily. In the little bags are pieces from the cores. Note the lines from the drilling. They no doubt will look familiar to you. I threw in a larger one that is easier to see. There are 2 diamond core drills. The smaller one is one of my favorites, with thin walls. The larger is more industrial, but you can easily see the diamonds. With proper care, this will last you a while. The small drill is hollow, so to remove a stuck core, tap a nail or something down from the top to knock it out. So proper care means paying attention. When cutting, remember the following, or you will be known for being the Johnsons of tube drills, a moniker that has been dead for thousands of years, and you will own it. Speed. On your drill press, 500 to 800 RPM or so. Slower is okay if you have time. No faster. Too fast equals Johnson. Water. It is essential to flush the rock from the cutting interface. I just immerse what I am cutting in a tray of water so it is covered and then cut underwater. Move the drill up and down every few seconds, a bit rhythmically to keep water at the bottom of the drilled hole, clearing the cuttings and keeping the diamonds on the work surface. Imagine yourselves down by the Nile with a water-powered cutter with water flowing over the drill hole, flushing out the cuttings. Not enough water equals Johnson. Pressure. Don't push down too hard, but too light gets you nowhere. Start slowly and don't let the bit walk around. I drilled through this sample in maybe 3 minutes, 5 tops. Softer stone cuts faster, harder stone slower. But if you push too hard, you can ruin the drill, which equals Johnson. I am convinced they used diamond tube drills just like these. I assume he means the Egyptians. There is an ample supply of diamond on the same continent, and you do not need a huge supply. Most diamond is black or brown anyway, so don't imagine what you see in jewelry. Look up bort. More importantly, diamond is easy to cast into metal like bronze and can be reused. It will look like dark, coarse sand. A pickup load would last you 100 years. If you do your work in the river, the remnants would be nearly impossible to find. Also, it is important to note that a tube drill is much faster through rock than a solid regular type drill bit. It makes sense to me that you would see them preferentially used. So there you go. Have fun, then drill some holes in rocks you find. This is nothing fancy, but reproduces exactly what you see in the cores and holes from the ancients. Have fun. Chuck Oanes.
So bort, just looked it up on Wikipedia here, is an umbrella term used in the diamond industry to refer to shards of non-gem grade quality diamonds. In the manufacturing and heavy industries, bort is used to describe dark, imperfectly formed or crystallized diamonds of varying levels of opacity.
Cool.
The lowest grade crushing bort is crushed by steel mortars and used to make industrial grade abrasive grits. Small bort crystals are used in drill bits, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo provides 70% of the world's supply of crushing bort.
Ah. Okay, so in the package there was a slab of stone that he has cut 2 cores out of, one using the larger, one using the smaller drill. 2 different drill sizes, core drill sizes, plus the instructions. So yeah, I think we'll take this to the shop and hook it up to the old drill press and give it a shot.
Yeah, and you can see the striations on the cores.
Yep.
Can't tell if they spiral. They probably do.
It does look very similar to what we've seen before.
Yeah.
Is that one cut through serpentine? What is that?
And it could be that this spiral is scratched into the core when drawing out the bit.
Yeah.
Perhaps. I don't know.
Like going in and out.
Who knows?
Yeah.
We'll have to see. We'll have to try it out.
For sure.
Appreciate it, man. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, these bits are pretty sweet.
Let's see. Box number 2. You have it over there.
Yes.
It's artwork. And has a long handwritten note. I feel like we're being trolled. This is it AJ?
Yeah, AJ.
AJ
Schlechten. Right?
Yeah. I think so. AJ
Yeah.
Schlechten. So AJ, thank you so much. Got some great artwork in here. I love the pyramids one, the circle and the pyramids and the sun and the moon and the wings.
Yeah, that's really cool. And then there's a couple of there's like these little booklets. One is basically a manual for how the universe works, which is pretty cool.
And then there's another booklet called
there's a comedy aspect to this that I'm sure is on purpose.
Yeah.
Like this one here. See, this is not a pipe.
Right.
But yeah, it's pretty cool stuff.
And there's another booklet called At First I Thought I Was Dying, which also has a comedy aspect. It's photos with little poems on the
that one's good.
on the right. A monster tried to catch me, a thing with 1,000 limbs. My days of boxing came in handy.
It's like a tree branch.
Yeah.
Trying to kick his ass. That's good stuff, man.
As for the note, thank you. It's beautiful, handwritten in what looks like red pen, but I can't read handwritten notes on this show. So if you have this, digitally, send it to us in the email, and I will read it. But to summarize, he's a Patreon supporter. Thank you very much. He wonders if the serapeum was for growing crystals. He says Crowley was a troll. He says David Matheson is awesome, and he loves the interviews with him. He gives us suggestions for guests. And he says people should check out his Instagram, which is at AJ Schlechten.
Which is SCHLECHTEN.
And his website is ajschlechten.com. I'll put these in the show notes. So thank you very much, man. The artwork is great. We got a couple stickers we're going to give to Soul. Soul loves the stickers. Okay. And then last but not least, we have one from our friend Chandra, who was also on one of the Scablands trip with us. What do we got here? What's this bag for? Okay, here. I'll read this while you sort that out. Chandra says, Snake Bros, Happy New Year. I was hoping to get this package delivered before Christmas, but I did not receive all the items in time. I have put together some items from a couple of favorite vendors that are always at the Conscious Life Expo every year in Los Angeles, in the hopes of generating good vibes towards the Snake Bro family. First, there are t-shirts that feature sacred geometry designs that use crystal-infused ink, a blend of more than 37 supportive crystals and gems. I wore a few of these during the Scablands trip. Forgive me if I got the t-shirt sizes wrong. It's just a best guess, and I'd rather them fit slightly large than be too small. These shirts are sold by the Disclosure Fest Foundation, which puts on a mass meditation events around the Los Angeles area. They were the first to bring such a unique line of clothing to the market.
Cool. Yeah, the artwork on the t-shirt's like
beautiful sacred geometry.
It's reflective. It's like glittering and stuff from the crystals, I suppose.
The rest of the items are from an online store called Vibes Up. They use their own form of crystal tech in their products. I have really become a fan of their energy bracelets. Since I am constantly been bombarded by EMF, I started acquiring different devices and gadgets to block out EMF. What was quite an interesting development that I did not notice right away was that the EMF/5G harmonizer bands seem to have other magical properties. Both myself and a fellow coworker noticed a significant decrease in our seasonal allergies. Another friend noticed that the band seemed to curb her appetite when worn throughout the day. Although these are anecdotal examples, it seems like these bracelets are not only reduce EMF, but perhaps give you whatever your constitution needs. Also, it provides some small-scale evidence to the idea of healing through crystal therapy. So hopefully these devices have a positive impact on your overall well-being. If nothing else, at least these bands are more stylish than wearing a tinfoil hat. I've included some other fun items from Vibes Up just to check out as well. Anyway, I will be off to the CLE 2022 at the beginning of February, and we can only hope that the Snake Bro family is able to attend this conference sometime in the near future. In the meantime, keep up the great work. I am constantly amazed by the deep dive journeys that your podcast takes us through. Your friend in Cali, Chandra. Thank you so much.
Hey, this leaf bowl says do not microwave. I need to charge these crystals up sometimes. What's the deal? That's cool. Look, it's got in the base of the bowl. It's all embedded with.
Oh yeah.
crystals. And there's some LED bulbs here.
Sweet.
And I'm gonna hook one of these up in the cube right now.
Oh man, look at that.
We'll see if we make a better show.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for all the one-up boxes, all the stuff. Man, freaking crystal-infused t-shirts.
Yeah.
But I can't wear one of those bands because my phone actually uses 5G. Like, what am I going to do? What are you doing?
This crystal bulb is trying to destroy the entire electrical system in my highly EMF charged studio. It's like...
Oh, yeah, like he pulls the switch and all the lights turn out.
All right. Put it over here.
What about this side?
No, I want it on my side.
Okay. Well,
there we go. Whoa. That's pretty sweet. Oh, it's a flame.
there it is. While Kyle's doing that, I'll do Space Weather News. From spaceweather.com, I had to find the button. An active sunspot emerges. An active sunspot is emerging over the sun's northeastern limb. So far today, it has produced two almost M-class solar flares, along with minor low-frequency radio blackouts over the South Pacific and Indian Oceans. The sunspot's potential for more and stronger flares will become clear later today as it turns more squarely towards Earth. Current conditions, solar wind speed is 482.5 kilometers per second, and the density is 7.7 protons per cubic centimeter. Current sunspot number is 53. Neutron count is 7.3% above the space age average. The KP index is 2, which is quiet, and the 24-hour max was 3, which is at the top end of the quiet range. So there's your space weather news for the week. And Kyle's still trying to hook up this. Oh, it's supposed to
It's flames.
Yeah.
It's a flame bulb.
Right. Okay, so they flicker like flames. Wow.
Okay, you want me to turn this one out?
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
There we go.
Man.
Yeah, now we got torches on the walls.
We don't even need this one going on.
Okay, this is cool.
This is pretty cool.
These bulbs are sweet.
So what else do we have? I've got emails. You got a story?
I do. All right, let me get. Sorry for the all the noise back there. Okay, this is from phys.org, astronomy and space. And let's see. International collaboration offers new evidence of gravitational wave background. The results of a comprehensive search for a background of ultra-low frequency gravitational waves has been announced by an international team of astronomers, including scientists from the Institute for Gravitational Wave Astronomy at the University of Birmingham. These light-year scale ripples, a consequence of Einstein's theory of general relativity, permeate all of space-time and could originate from mergers of the most massive black holes in the universe or form events occurring soon after the formation of the universe in the Big Bang. Scientists have been searching for definitive evidence of these giant signals for several decades. The International Pulsar Timing Array, IPTA, joining the work of several astrophysicists' collaborations from around the world, recently completed its search for gravitational waves in their most recent official data release known as Data Release 2, or DR2. This dataset consists of precision timing data from 65 millisecond pulsars, stellar remnants, which spin hundreds of times per second, sweeping narrow beams of radio waves that appear as pulses due to the spinning obtained by combining the independent data sets from the IPTA's 3 founding members, which are the European Pulsar Timing Array, EPTA, the North American Nanohertz Observatory for Gravitational Waves, which is NanoGrav, and the Parkes Pulsar Timing Array in Australia, PPTA. These combined data reveal strong evidence for an ultra-low frequency signal detected by many of the pulsars in the combined data. The characteristics of this common among pulsars signal are in broad agreement with those expected from a gravitational wave background. The gravitational wave background is formed by many different overlapping gravitational wave signals emitted from the cosmic population of supermassive binary black holes, i.e., 2 supermassive black holes orbiting each other and eventually merging. This is similar to background noise from the many overlapping voices in a crowded hall. This result further strengthens the gradual emergence of similar signals that have been found in the individual data sets of the participating pulsar timing collaborations over the past few years. Professor Alberto Vecchio, director of the Institute for Gravitational Wave Astronomy at the University of Birmingham and a member of the EPTA, says, "The detection of gravitational waves from a population of massive black hole binaries or from another cosmic source will give us unprecedented insights into how galaxies form and grow or cosmological processes taking place in the infant universe." A major international effort of the scale of the IPTA is needed to reach this goal, and the next few years could bring us a golden age for those explorations of the universe. This is a very exciting signal. Although we do not have definitive evidence yet, we may be beginning to detect a background of gravitational waves, says Dr. Siwan Chen, a member of the EPTA and NanoGrav and the leader of the IPTA DR2 search and publication. Dr. Boris Goncharov from the PPTA cautions on the possible interpretations of such common signals. We are also looking into what else this signal could be. For example, perhaps it could result from noise that is present in individual pulsars' data that may have been improperly modeled in our analysis. It's only models all the time. It's always models. To identify the gravitational wave background as the origin of this ultra-low frequency signal, the IPTA must also detect spatial correlations between pulsars. This means that each pair of pulsars must respond in a very particular way to gravitational waves, depending on their separation on the sky. These signature correlations between pulsar pairs are the smoking gun for a gravitational wave background detection. Without them, it is difficult to prove that some other process is not responsible for the signal. Intriguingly, the first indication of a gravitational wave background could be a common signal like that seen in the IPTA DR2. Whether or not this spectrally similar low-frequency signal is correlated between pulsars in accordance with the theoretical predictions will be resolved with further data collection, expanded arrays of monitored pulsars, and continuing searches of the resulting longer and larger data sets. Is this making any sense?
Are they saying that they're detecting the gravitational waves through like perturbations in the pulsar signals?
Yeah, something
Okay.
like that.
Okay.
Like it's these gigantic, like the most energetic interactions in the universe. They're looking at those signals and seeing weird fluctuations in them. That this is what I'm assuming that
Yeah,
they
like
think there may be.
A pulsar is a neutron star that's spinning very quickly. Basically, I think that's the theory.
Mm-hmm.
So, like right after you have a supernova, the remnant of that star is a neutron star, and it's very hot, and they're spinning really fast, and they still have a magnetic field, and it pulses, and some of them pulse many hundreds of times a second
Right.
in the radio band. So they're loud in the radio band. And so I guess they're saying they're seeing fluctuations in those signals that correlate across many pulsars that cover vast areas of space that imply that there are enormous gravitational waves causing the changes in the signal.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's go back to this paragraph here. The gravitational wave background is formed by many different overlapping gravitational wave signals emitted from the cosmic population of supermassive binary black holes.
Right. That's where they think the gravitational waves originate
emitted,
from.
yeah, so
but
there's
what they're seeing them through is the pulsar signals.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like the pulsar signals are being modulated
Yeah.
by this background.
Right. That's cool. And this is also going to what, who was the guy that was the head of the LIGO or one of the heads?
I always forget his name. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
He said that
the Nobel Prize winner.
right. He said LIGO was the very beginning, and that what they were going to be able to do with it eventually, hopefully, was see through what they call the Dark Ages into the early universe. The Dark Ages being the period of the early universe where no light escaped, nothing in the light spectrum of the nothing in the higher ends of the electromagnetic spectrum penetrated that area, that early phase of the universe, because it was so dense. But gravitational waves would. So they would be able to look farther back in time using gravitational waves, and they have been able to use...
I think that's the conclusion at the end of this.
Yeah. So they're finding like a gravitational wave background similar to the microwave background.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So to back up what you were saying, I think right here he's saying in order to identify the gravitational wave background as the origin of this ultra low frequency signal, they need to detect spatial correlations between pulsars.
Okay.
So as you a gravitational wave is an actual like sort of pressurization or rarefication of space-time.
Yeah.
So if they know the distance between two pulsars and they know they're like when their signals happen, and then they can sort of triangulate, they can say, okay, there is a background,
Yeah. You can detect the
model
wave.
all that data and see where what the background of gravitational waves is. Let's see. But yeah, I just thought this was cool because
It is cool.
To think of that, like that there's this, I guess it would be like noise, but I kind of have always wondered if this idea of gravity, I know that's not the same as a gravitational wave, gravity itself, but the idea that there's like a field
Yeah.
of this energy that's fluctuating all over the place, which is kind of what sets things in their patterns, or is a force that pushes things into these similar patterns that we recognize in nature. That's just a cool idea. So,
yeah, they're calling it gravitational waves, but it's similar to what you're talking about there, like elastic universe stuff.
Yeah, it's a gigantic field of resonating space-time.
Right.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. All right, let's tackle some emails. This one is called Yucatan Pyramids. This is from Karen. It says, "Hi, Russ and Kyle. I just returned from a short little jaunt to Cancun to ring in 2022. While I was there, I took a day to go to Tulum
Heck yeah.
and Coba. You've been to Tulum, right? Or
No.
Okay. Tulum has lots of ruins still standing and was a Mayan seaport. Coba has 2 pyramids, plus some other interesting ruins and the remnants of the ancient roadway that connected the Mayan sites. It sounds. What was it? Where did you go that was similar to this?
Well, I was in
Belize?
I was in Cozumel.
Cozumel. That's it. You said there was this road and like it went to the jungle and
Yeah, I went straight into a wall of jungle. They were
Yeah.
still clearing it out.
Right. I am told that you could climb the big pyramid at Coba. I think it's about 140 feet tall until recently when they closed it. Hopefully it will reopen someday because I would have loved to have gotten to the top of the thing. I did not make it to Chichen Itza this trip because I only had one day to tour, but this site is also quite easy to get to from Cancun. There's plenty on the interwebs about these sites, so I won't make this a long email by typing that which everyone can Google and read about themselves, and I will get to my point. I write this today. It's still a book. I write this today because after binge listening to / watching all of your Egypt episodes and videos, I thought it might seem depressing in a way to people for whom the pyramids in Egypt are just too difficult to get to. Besides Egypt, Peru tends to get a lot of top coverage, and it too requires considerable cash and time and resources that many folks simply don't have. So I thought I'd spend a few moments to remind folks about the places I recently visited because they tend to be somewhat overlooked in favor of the megalithic sites. But for me, being in the presence of the ruins and artifacts in the Yucatan created this sense of unfathomable distance between me and the people that made them, who knows how many thousands of years ago. That feeling is indescribable and quite remarkable, even still several days later. It's an experience worth having, so I wanted to encourage people to seize on it if they are able. Cancun, for just about everyone in North America, is, by comparison to Egypt or Peru, remarkably accessible. Mexico has pretty much zero COVID restrictions as of now. You have to fill out an attestation that you're not sick, and you have to wear a mask in some places. An antigen test is required to re-enter the U.S., but all the resorts have testing facilities on site. So you can make an appointment, so on and so forth. There are literally hundreds of all-inclusive resorts and package deals, so you don't have to shell out a lot of cash for this. Plus, you don't have to use something like 4 total days of your precious vacation time just getting to and fro. I took a guided tour, but that's by no means required. Taxis are available to the sites if you don't want to be constrained by a group. However, I thought it was worth it to have the guide. He was incredibly knowledgeable and wasn't even full of standard model BS. Certainly, he helped create a richer experience for me than I would have gotten on my own. Another bonus from staying in Cancun is that when you get back to the hotel, you can hit a buffet or two and drink buckets full of included drinks and rest your sore feet from all the exploration beside a pool or in the ocean. How bad is that? So in summary, the Mayan pyramids and ruins may be an option for those of us in North America in particular who have no ability to commit to 2 to 3 weeks in Egypt or Peru and all the travel challenges and costs associated with these sites. Perhaps folks can make a shorter and much cheaper escape and see some pyramids and ancient ruins, which is surely better than no pyramids and ancient ruins.
I totally agree with everything that's going on.
I certainly thought it was worthwhile a worthwhile use of my time and resources. I can't possibly put it to words what it was like to actually touch these ruins and see with my own eyes carvings and structures and imagery I had only seen before on the internet. Certainly, I do hope to make it to both Egypt and Peru, but in the meantime, I thought, why not take advantage of something easy by comparison? Yeah. As I said above, the experience of being in the presence of the truly ancient is an experience worth having, and I wanted to share that it may not be as hard to come by as some may think. Happy New Year from Karen.
Happy New Year.
I totally agree, and we're gonna
do that.
We're gonna do that. We're gonna be organizing sites, trips to those sites. You know, Ben, we've become great friends with Ben, and we have plans in the works for Peru and Mexico and all that stuff. So we're going to be doing that in the future. And yes,
Mexico has been a big time destination that I've been wanting to look into. I love even some of the recent discoveries and stuff I've tried to follow, and definitely very interested in that stuff. And it's like, it's right here in our backyard.
Yeah.
It's like, those are our buddies over there,
Yeah.
beyond the wall. Let's go.
Okay, this one is from That One Dude. It's called UFO Episodes Commentary. Hey, Snake Bros, please forgive my bad punctuation and misspellings if they should plague me on this day. I really love Marty's take on all of this, and has been the road I've been heading down for years. To explain the phenomenon has to deal with religion, consciousness, Greek philosophy, angels, demons, monsters and serpents, and let's not forget the Fae, but mostly the occult and the hidden rituals and information held by the gatekeepers we call churches, governments, and secret societies. To an average Joe is painstakingly improbable. The reason for this email is to bring to your attention, I believe, that you are under the impression that we will never know what this phenomena actually is. I believe we have enough data to what it is, and that it comes from many facets of society. I think rather we are trying to find a unified theory or a new name for it when there are so many already. The question is not what should we name this, but rather how do we fit this in with the philosophy of our time. Thank you so much for the excellent content, and I have one suggestion. Like Soraya did with his UFO history shows, you should put yours into one big file when you're done so we could listen to it in one long marathon. Sincerely, That One Dude.
What do you think about that?
What?
Just tossing them all in a giant... Well, just stick it on the Patreon.
When are we going to be done?
Oh, bam! What do you say to that, old boy? That's a good point.
Yeah.
We haven't figured it all out yet.
Yep.
So when we figure it all out, we'll just take the whole show and just make it one big episode.
Yeah, that's right. Once we're done,
yeah,
I'll make one giant episode. I promise.
When we figured out the entire universe and how it all works, we'll take the entire podcast and make one show out of it. So you can just...
That's right. 8,000 hours of listening. Largest MP3 file in existence.
Next day, dead.
And as for us being under the impression that we will never know what this phenomena actually is, I'm not sure that that's the impression we're under. I would say that we are under the impression that we don't right now know what this phenomena is. And I don't think we're looking for a new name for it. But all of these are good points, I think.
What, the Eufy thing?
Yeah, no, we're not looking for a new name for Eufys. Right?
No.
And I don't think we're under the impression that we'll never know what this is. I think I think what we're saying is right now we don't know what it is. That doesn't mean we'll never know. So, yeah, but thank you. Good email. What do we got? Let's see. Okay, this is another UFO one. This is from Jason. It's called Near Houston, Pulsing Stationary Light. We hit it with a green laser and it scooted away. We were talking about flashes of light in the sky, right? This one's directed at Kyle. So, man. I don't have to answer this email at all. It says, Kyle.
What?
My wife and I live 30 miles west of Houston. Between the two of us, we've seen nearly a dozen pulsing stationary lights since 2013. Our last sighting was this past September 3rd at approximately 9 p.m. It was directly overhead near the Hercules star group. It was a very faint point of light with a pulsing cadence of approximately 2 to 4 seconds. After watching the light show for a couple of minutes, I went and got my green laser pointer, handed it to my wife, and laid back down on the pool lounge chair to continue observing. My wife pointed the laser at the object, and to our utter surprise, it immediately began moving across the sky to the east, disappearing off the horizon within 10 seconds, pulsing as it went.
Whoa, that's really cool.
I'm telling you this story because I'd love it if others in Texas who are seeing these lights would try observing the behavior, then hitting them with a laser to see if that behavior immediately changes, as was the case for us. From Jason.
This is happening.
We're totally going to do it.
I can't. Shooting the... Yeah. Shoot the aliens with lasers.
I mean, isn't that what you're supposed to do?
Yeah, it's a sign of goodwill. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I actually, thanks to History Shift, now have a very good,
both of us have a really good bright green laser. Yeah.
So I can totally shoot flashing lights.
It still isn't as awesome.
Thingies.
It still isn't as awesome as Matheson's purple lightsaber that he brought.
No, it's not quite as awesome.
That thing is amazing. Yep. Okay, this is called Pyramid Boxes as Proto-Arcs from Eric, who is also Wrath of Pharaoh in the Discord. Greetings, siblings of Snake. I was at work listening to episode 226 where you talk about Petrie, and in particular the idea that the pyramids seem to have been built according to the dimensions of the boxes stored within them, and that those boxes were inserted during construction with the rest of the pyramid built around them. This reminded me of Graham Hancock's point in the sign and the seal, where he quotes King David stating that he wants to build the temple in Jerusalem as a, quote, place for rest of the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, unquote.
Okay.
In other words, the primary purpose of the first temple was to house the Ark. Hancock also points out in that book that the Ark was inspired by very similar Egyptian artifacts. The sources all describe the Ark as being an object of immense and deadly power, and so had to be housed in a special place to protect people from it. Remember that? That was a big,
I do, yeah.
To protect the laity from it. That's right. I see a parallel here to the ancient pyramid builders. Were those pyramids built specifically to house those stone boxes or whatever was inside of them? If those boxes contained devices that generated some kind of radiation or energy as the later Ark of the Covenant did, then perhaps the pyramids served a similar function to Solomon's temple, harnessing that energy in some way and protecting the populace from it. We do see evidence in multiple pyramids of possible explosive damage. Perhaps the Ark, or specifically what was inside of it, was a relic from that early prehistoric master civilization, and perhaps was originally housed in one of the pyramids. Anyway, I thought it was fun to speculate. Keep up the amazing work. I am, etc., Eric, Wrath of Pharaoh, in the Discord, which I still neglect but promise to get more involved.
Me too, buddy. Me too.
Empty promises. Empty promises.
It'll happen. Yeah, that's really cool.
I like that. Yeah,
I do too. Yeah, that's so. I like it.
Yep. Thanks, Eric. Really appreciate that.
Okay, but this makes me. I should ask the Discord. Petrie wrote a bunch of books, so maybe there's one that has like all this information on Saqqara, and maybe he talks about the boxes in there, and
yeah,
because
we should just get all of his books.
I know. Yes,
I'll look for them on Amazon. Maybe I can find them for cheap.
But the point is, they definitely didn't dig those tunnels to match the dimensions of the boxes or whatever, because it's not a built
in the Serapeum.
In the Serapeum,
yeah.
So it's like is this a house for like it? So you have the stone box in the middle of the pyramid temple, like the temple that is designed in proportion to hold the ark, right?
Yeah.
And then you have a cave.
Which no man has ever entered.
It's fine. No, I know. But it's like there's gigantic ones in there, and it's like, well, this is like quick. This is the best we can do before the world's destroyed or something, right?
Yeah,
like just shove them down in there, get them safe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And it seems like those boxes aren't the artifacts themselves, but the things that they put the artifacts into.
Yeah,
you know
exactly. It's the thing.
They're the containers for whatever.
Right. And it's like, okay, like in it when this the scientists were developing the nuclear bomb and they were enriching uranium, and they had that whole facility that they were doing the enrichment in, and the physicists are over here at this other institution.
Yeah,
and they're
doing
like
math,
doing all the math and all this stuff. Yeah. And they're sending all the information over there, and the workers over there are doing stuff, and they're educated people, but they don't know the secret. They don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
They're just following the guidelines of the physicists.
Yeah.
And eventually the physicists go over there to kind of like, okay, let's go check on the project.
Warehouses with the materials. Yeah.
And then they realize that they're storing all of this stuff really close together.
Yeah.
And then they're like, whoa, no.
Yeah. This is a bad.
You got to get put those things in separate rooms. Like each one of those has to be in a separate room.
Yeah.
You can't just keep shoving them right next to each other in the storeroom.
Right.
Or you could cause the nuclear reaction.
Yeah.
So it just, that's what it makes me think of is like the Serapeum. It's like, what is the spacing, between these alcoves that these boxes are in?
And
Why,
each
why wouldn't they dig out a big wide room and just shove all the boxes in the room. No, each one had
Has
to
its
have
own
its
alcove,
own
yeah.
alcove.
Separated by many, many feet of
And
solid
you
stone.
notice that they're staggered in a lot of cases on either side of the
Right.
hallway.
Oh, yeah.
They're not even
so
directly.
the openings of the alcoves don't face each other.
Don't even face each other.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So it's pretty cool ideas,
That
buddy.
does imply possible radioactive something. Where you don't want a chain reaction going. To get going.
And you could easily see how later people would come along and say, "Oh, this is a place for the dead."
Yeah, because anybody who goes in here dies. That's right. And it's a curse. Absolutely. All right, one more. This is another book. This is also about Egypt. This is from Keith from upstate New York. It says, "Hi guys, other than a brief comment a few months ago, I have never sent an email to y'all. No time like the present. So just a brief tale of discovery. I came upon you by the oft-mentioned path, Rogan to Hancock to Carlson to Stags.
You have followed the path.
I probably found you in early 2020 and quickly gobbled up all of your existing podcasts. Now I eagerly await your latest podcast every week, as well as Cosmographia. I've jumped on HowTube as well. Can't get enough of this prehistoric civilization discussion. By the way, as a resident of New York State, I really enjoyed episode 227 regarding Vermont. I have hiked in New York and Vermont years ago and seen stone walls and structures of the like mentioned in that episode. I often assumed colonial origin, but now I am rethinking that.
Awesome.
I have to quickly say how much I am inspired by your enthusiasm. It's a blast listening to the fun you're having while tackling this group of alternative topics. I find it so enjoyable, and you have definitely made a loyal listener out of me. Each week, while I eagerly await the next snakish symposium, I am also tuning into the ruminations of your fellow YouTubers like Ben from Uncharted X, Johanna, and Jimmy to fill the gap. And I am busily trying to map out future episodes for you. Bear with me on this. So my pet topic, one that I've been dying to hear you ponder in more depth, is the Egyptians' description of their own predecessors. The idea that they are something like a legacy culture with their own deep past. I have heard many mentions of a wall somewhere that has hieroglyphs that mention that which came before them. I have heard many people refer to the hieroglyphs on this subject, but I've never heard or read a proper translation of the writings in their entirety. They must exist translated in a book somewhere, but I do not recall their physical location and have yet to come across these writings after many internet searches. I think you were there, unless I am mistaken. After listening, okay, take a break here. What he's talking about, I think,
Edfu
is the
text.
Edfu text, and Ben and I specifically set out to find that wall, and we took extremely high resolution images of them. It's a very
extreme
resolution, extremely high. It's a very dense wall of text, and of course, Ben and I can't translate it, but we did send those images off, or at least I sent the ones I took to Ben, and then he is supposed to be taking those and sending them to the professor. That's what I called him. The
translator.
The translator, the guy who could read hieroglyphs on the tour with us. So we're supposed to be. He agreed that he would translate that wall for us. And we're just, we need to get the translation. Like, is this the text that is being talked about that says it mentions an ancient lost civilization? That Graham Hancock talks about, the Edfu building texts. We haven't gotten that translation yet, but we are working on it. Okay. Back to the email. After listening to the speculations of John Anthony West, Robert Schoch, Graham Hancock, and others, I am left with the idea that the pyramids and the Sphinx probably both predate dynastic Egypt and even the Younger Dryas impact itself. If Plato's description of Atlantis is to be believed, and I do believe it, then logic suggests that there must have been quite a lot going on in the centuries and even millennia before the impact. Along these lines, it's fun to speculate that Egypt's predecessors were somehow related to Atlantis itself, or at least contemporaries of them. Yeah, so I think the way I remember Plato's description coming from the Egyptian priests is that they were contemporaries, they were not the Atlanteans themselves. The idea is that the Atlanteans were invading Egypt and Greece, Athens, and Egypt and Athens teamed up to fight back against them, right? Wasn't that the basic story?
Yeah, something like that, yeah. And then something happened.
Like Egypt was losing to Atlantis, and it was when the Athenian warriors joined the fight that they won. Something like that, right? And then Atlantis sinks. So anyway, as the Egyptian priest said to Solon, Quote, I mean to say that in mind you are all young. There is no old opinion handed down among you and by ancient tradition, nor any science which is hoary with age. And I will tell you why. There have been and will be again many destructions of mankind arising out of many causes. The greatest have been brought about by the agencies of fire and water, and other lesser ones by innumerable other causes, unquote. And another thing. Many people seem to avoid mentioning the biblical flood of Noah in the same breath as the Younger Dryas Meltwater Pulse 1b. I get it. It's hard to maintain credibility when you talk Bible. It's the age-old thought that science and Christianity are at odds, which I never agreed with, even as a practicing Christian. The problems come with interpretation of text rather than lack of compatibility. Anyway, I am an agnostic in my older years, so I no longer care about having those kinds of debates. But to me, it is completely obvious that the comet impact in Meltwater Pulse 1b is the source event for the account of Noah's flood and all the other flood myths found across the millennia since it happened. I believe Randall touches on this thought already. And by the way, when the hell is that Carlson guy going to write a book? It's the deep history that I'm most fascinated with. This is what originally drew me to Graham Hancock and to Randall and to the Brothers of the Serpent. More on Egypt, I say, and more on the flood. Bring it on. Yours most faithfully, Keith from upstate New York.
Awesome, man. I totally agree. It's like, oh, dude, that's pretty cool. Wait, how old is that? It's 2,000 years old.
Yeah. It's not old enough.
Not quite old enough.
Right. Those are rookie numbers.
Yeah.
He says, P.S. At my ripe old age of 57, I really don't think I am in the kind of shape I need to be to hike up mountains or squeeze through pyramid tunnels, but I would love to come on one of Randall's excursions in the U.S. sometime. Can a fellow come along on one of these trips and get something cool out of it while skipping some of the more strenuous parts of the voyage? Would love to hear your thoughts.
Absolutely, man.
The trips we do with Randall, most of the spots we visit do not require any hiking at all.
Yeah. You will have to do a couple backflips off of giant cliffs into some water.
It is required that you do backflips off of cliffs into water.
That's how you become part of the brotherhood.
That's right.
No, just kidding.
But yeah, it's real easy.
You can totally do it.
Yeah.
Totally do it.
Absolutely. I mean, there are places we go where some people hike off and climb stuff, but it's not necessary to see what we're seeing. A lot of times you just get out of the van and we're there. You don't have to go anywhere.
Yeah. And then, sometimes I go do crazy hikes and then other times I just chill because it's like, I'm kind of tired.
Yeah.
So choose your own adventure.
Right.
Basically.
And wasn't there a guy that was kind of like used a cane and like, what was he? We had some pretty old people there that were like hobbling around and they were fine.
Yep.
Yeah. It's not strenuous unless you want it to be. You can try to climb things and, fall and die.
Oh, no. There was somebody there using a cane, but they weren't old. That was Laura.
Oh.
Remember?
Laura was the one with the cane.
Laura
yeah,
C.
she had basically a broken ankle.
Laura
and she
C.
went
had a
hiking.
broken ankle and she was doing fine.
But wasn't that in...
That was Matheson event.
Yeah. But yes, if you go to the Scablands or Montana, I don't think it's not strenuous in terms of, you don't have to squeeze through places and there's no hiking.
Yeah.
No, not very much hiking involved at all. So.
And even in Egypt, if you are so inclined, you don't have to go climbing through the pyramids. The temples are amazing and they're easy to walk through. And even walking just on the grounds around the pyramids is great. It's awesome.
Absolutely. And then we'll let everybody know about Peru because I know that one's upsy. Right? It's high elevation and you're doing a lot of climbing. But we haven't been there yet, so we don't have firsthand experience.
Yeah.
But Ben says, you spend the first couple of days just acclimating to the
bring
the
an oxygen tank.
Yeah. All right, that's all the emails. That's all the news stories.
Warm and fuzzies.
Love
you
for
guys.
everybody. Thank you for the one-up boxes. And
we'll be right back.
Take a break, and we'll come back and we'll start the Book of the Damned.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. You are listening to Arabia. Some little doodle. Also featuring on Cosmographia sometimes. But anyway, this is Book of the Damned Part 1. And we are already 50 minutes in. So let's go.
So what I'm going to be reading from is a recently, well, I don't know if it's actually recently, but it's a release of the collected works of Charles Fort. It is titled The Book of the Damned, but it has all 4 of his books in it. Let's see, when was this published? Yeah, so and I also want to say The Book of the Damned itself was first published in 1919. So keep that in mind, when we're going through some of this stuff.
1919.
Yeah, 1920, 1919 is the...
That's way
okay, so this was, but this compendium of the collected works was published in 2008.
But he was actually writing this stuff in 1919.
Yeah, and earlier. Yeah, doing all the research for it and writing it. It was published in 1919. Came out, it really hit the shelves in 1920. Okay, so introduction, and so with what I like to do with these book reports is read the various introductions. So there are 2 for this book, for this collected works, and the first one is by Jim Steinmeyer, and then the second one is by Fort himself. So we'll go through these. Charles Fort took on the establishment, science, philosophy, and theology in these 4 books published between 1919 and 1932. In many ways, he created how we now think about the supernatural, pioneering a unique literary concoction from mixtures of belief and skepticism, scholarship, and humor. Over the decades, Fort has inspired gasps, laughs, and plenty of head-scratching. Reading Fort is a ride on a comet, wrote Maynard Shipley in a 1941 New York Times review, continuing, quote, Fort, it is true, writes thrillers, non-fictional thrillers, but more melodramatic than any mystery novel yet published. He is rash. He ventures where angels fear to tread. He is the enfant terrible of science, bringing the family skeletons to the dinner table when distinguished guests are present. I think I think that means he embarrasses people. Yeah. Fort's books did more than provide the template for decades of later writers. His famous collection of oddities and his steadfast contentions that our world is a very strange place have never been matched. Charles Hoy Fort was born in Albany, New York in 1874, the oldest son in a wealthy family of wholesale grocers. He was the problem child, rebellious, questioning, and dissatisfied with the family business. His father worked hard to discipline him and, failing that, then tried to ensure that Charles never received the family money. By 1892, Ford experienced some success as a newspaper reporter working in Brooklyn. Eventually, he scraped together enough cash to embark on an eccentric, improvised world tour to wander with a definite purpose. His budget was less than $1 a day, and he deliberately made no plans, taking odd jobs as necessary, sleeping on bales of hay or under viaducts, looking for experiences that might be of use in his writing career. When he finally returned to New York, Fort focused his writing on big city characters and wry stories of tenement life. He married Anna Flinning, an immigrant of Irish-English parents whom he had known in Albany, though her lowly status further infuriated his family. The couple settled into a cheap apartment in Manhattan. While he was selling his humorous stories to the pulp magazines in Manhattan, Fort came to the attention of a young magazine editor named Theodore Dreiser. Dreiser had just completed the novel that would make him famous, Sister Carrie. But the book had been fraught with difficulties. After agreeing to publish Sister Carrie, Doubleday decided that its content was too risque and scuttled the project. After years of work, Dreiser was almost ruined, and he settled for an editor's job at Street and Smith, a popular publisher of pulp monthlies. Dreiser was intrigued by Fort's quirky stories and invited the author to his downtown offices. In later years, Dreiser described that fateful meeting. A quiet bear of a man with a large walrus mustache stepped through the door. Fort was so painfully shy that he resisted any personal conversation and kept his hands buried in the pockets of his overcoat. Quote, "To this day, when I see Hardy, Oliver Hardy of the film comedy team Laurel and Hardy, I see Fort as he was then, that unctuous, ingratiating mood, those unwieldy, deferential, twittery mannerisms were Fort's then. Somehow he was the embodiment of the charming thing that I had read." Dreiser purchased many of Fort's short stories and encouraged him to try his hand at a novel, which Dreiser maneuvered into a publishing house. This was Fort's strange account of city lowlifes, the outcast manufacturers, which drew on his experience with poverty and dreams of enterprise in New York City. The book's lack of success soured Fort on fiction, and he began visiting the New York Public Library, searching the stacks. He studied philosophy, calculus, anthropology, or any other subject that caught his interest. Fort was an inveterate collector, and he assembled odd accounts of phenomena that fell outside accepted theories, and he found them everywhere, especially in scientific journals and histories. He took notes on small slips of paper, sorting them by subject, cross-referencing them by date, and storing them in cardboard shoeboxes in his apartment.
That's awesome. Holy crap.
Soon he had tens of thousands of notes, things that had never been explained or that, according to science, could not be explained. Fort's research was distilled into two manuscripts, X and Y, which were both later destroyed by Fort, which proposed that humanity might be controlled by Martians or a race of unknown beings at the North Pole.
Whoa.
Dreiser was fascinated by metaphysics and thought Fort's theories were revolutionary, but he was unable to find a publisher for his friend's books. Fort abruptly changed directions, throwing out most of the speculation and concentrating on the disquieting nature of the oddities. He then wrote Z, which evolved into his classic, The Book of the Damned. In some ways, there would have been no Charles Fort without Theodore Dreiser. Although they saw each other infrequently, Dreiser was Fort's best friend for more than 25 years. From their first meeting, Dreiser was his champion, cheerleader, coach, and literary mentor. Dreiser later recounted the story of how The Book of the Damned was published. Frustrated by his failure with X and Y, he took Fort's new manuscript to his personal publisher, Horace Liverwright. Contemplating the nature of the book, Liverwright objected, "But I can't do it. We'll lose money." And Dreiser countered, "If you don't publish it, you'll lose me." The book hit bookstores at the right time, early in 1920. The country was being rattled by anarchist terrorists, Wall Street capitalists, shifty politicians, hectoring fundamentalists, and all-knowing scientists who soberly reported having received radio signals from Martians. The Book of the Damned whispered that there was something very wrong with how we thought about the world. Fort deliberately pushed his damned facts on his readers, insisting that science had constructed its convenient theories only by ignoring those facts that gave us trouble.
That's great.
And what facts they were. Frogs fell from the skies, and so did fish. Blocks of ice, rains of blood, and manna were regularly observed falling from the heavens. Stars, planets, and comets didn't move in the accepted manner as they should. Gravity was sometimes defied, and science couldn't explain it, and even worse, seemed determined not to try. The success of the Book of the Damned allowed Fort to continue his quest. Now in his 40s, he had finally inherited a modest amount of the family money that his father had determined to withhold from him. So Charles and Anna Fort decided to move to London, where he did research at the British Library. Throughout the 1920s, he worked between London and New York, gathering thousands of accounts of oddities that make up his 3 later books. In 1929, the Forts returned permanently to New York and rented an apartment in the Bronx. By now, Charles Fort was known as a recluse. He avoided leaving home, seldom saw friends, and occupied his time with a game of his own invention, Super Checkers, which was played on a board with 800 tiny squares. Super Checkers.
Super Checkers.
Even after the success of Fort's books, Dreiser continued to offer quotes, endorsements, and interviews and support letter-writing campaigns to further Fort's name. In 1931, when Tiffany Thayer, a young novelist friend of Fort's, proposed organizing a Fortian society to promote the author's fame, Fort quickly objected. "I wouldn't join it any more than I'd be an elk." But Fort was tricked into attending the inaugural meeting where Dreiser, a charter member, offered a long speech in honor of his friend. Charles Hoy Fort died in 1932 after a long, debilitating illness. Most likely he suffered from leukemia. His natural skepticism of science had contributed to his health problems as he avoided medical care for many months. Dreiser delivered the eulogy at his funeral, and newspapers announced the death of America's unique literary phenomenon, the foe of science. For decades, readers have puzzled over Fort's point of view. Fort saw himself primarily as a writer, not a philosopher or a researcher. Throughout his books, he refuses to take any theories fully seriously, including his own. See, this is why I feel a kinship with this guy. At times, he sees himself as more of a humorist than a researcher. Got to throw in those jokes.
Yeah, you got to have the jokes.
Still, as you read his books, you'll notice his favorite notions, certain ideas returning to the forefront of his cosmos. Perhaps the best way to explain Fort is to note that he poses questions very seriously, but refuses to accept the answers seriously. Mm-hmm. See? I love this.
That's great.
It's Fort's agnosticism, his ability to shrug as he proselytizes, that keeps his books so beguiling. In 1941, when these 4 books on phenomena were first collected into one volume, Tiffany Thayer, president of the Fortian Society, wrote the introduction. Thayer advises readers to skip the first chapter of the Book of the Damned, Fort's quibbles with science, and move directly to the second, his famous accounts of phenomena. This was terrible advice. Thayer was trying to make the experience more inviting for his readers by avoiding Fort's mannered theoretical expressions. The beginning of the Book of the Damned is also Fort at his most contrary and captivating. But I'll risk offering my own advice to readers. If you're discovering Fort for the first time, begin with his 3rd book, Lo. Fort, it's just L-O exclamation mark. That's the name of the 3rd book.
Lo and behold.
Lo! Fort wrote it at the height of his powers and fussed over it longer than he did over the other 3 books. His humor, doubt, and weird accounts are beautifully blended in it so that every element sparkles. Then proceed to the next book, Wild Talents, which Fort finished just before his death. Because it concentrates on people's paranormal abilities, the facts in it can veer towards spiritualists, poltergeists, publicists, and frauds in general. But the book puts its author front and center, and he fills the pages with warm, self-effacing observations. It is an excellent glimpse of Charles Fort himself. After that, circle back to the Book of the Damned. Fort's first book of oddities is a cool, analytical fusillade fired across the bow of science. I particularly like the artful way that the phenomena seem to overpower the book and indeed the author. Fort's damned facts march and march. Their footfalls soon drown out his distinctive voice and rattle in our brains. I agree. Like, as you go through this book, you'll notice, like, and I'll point this out later when we get to Fort's actual introduction, because like the guy says, that's bad advice to skip it. We're not going to skip it. But you'll see, like, Fort has this cadence of writing. Like, he loves commas, and he loves colons, and he hates periods, right? The dude does not want to end a sentence.
That's great.
Okay.
What's the name of the checkers game?
Super Checkers.
Super Checkers. You don't want it to end.
That's right. 800 squares. Super Checkers. And finally, Jim says, read New Lands. In his 2nd book, Fort was still experimenting with his format. The book is separated into distinct chunks of argument or phenomena, and thus this text can be more challenging. Buried within it are amazing facts and perspectives, including some of the earliest accounts of what were later called flying saucers, and the inspiration for later accounts of the Bermuda Triangle. So we'll have to check some of that out.
All
So.
right.
I'm pleased that Tarcher and Penguin has decided to republish the Fort Gospel in a convenient edition, and I'm inspired to think that new readers are about to turn the page and share the experience that has delighted, befuddled, and nonplussed readers since the 1920s, reading Charles Fort. Remembering when I first discovered Fort, I must confess that I'm jealous of all of you who are about to embark on the journey for the first time. It is a unique ride on a comet that will leave you delighted, unsettled, and squinting from the unexpected sprinkle of cosmic dust in your eyes.
That's cool. That's great. I love it already.
Yeah. All right. So chapter 1, and you're going to get your...
Wait, hold on.
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Crack
I'm ready.
crack that beer. So I'm going to do my best with this. I've been actually having to, because of the way he writes, it's strange. So I've actually been practicing reading this out loud. So hopefully it'll come across. But yeah, stop me whenever you need to. Yeah. A procession of the damned. By the damned, I mean the excluded. We shall have a procession of data that science has excluded. Battalions of the accursed, captained by pallid data that I have exhumed, will march. You'll read them, or they'll march. Some of them livid, and some of them fiery, and some of them rotten. Some of them are corpses, skeletons, mummies, twitching, tottering, animated by companions that have been damned alive. There are giants that will walk by, though sound asleep. There are things that are theorems and things that are rags. They'll go by like Euclid, arm in arm with the spirit of anarchy. Here and there will flit little harlots. Many are clowns, but many are of the highest respectability. Some are assassins. There are pale stenches and gaunt superstitions and mere shadows and lively malices, whims and amiabilities. The naive and the pedantic and the bizarre and the grotesque and the sincere and the insincere, the profound and the puerile. A stab and a laugh and the patiently folded hands of hopeless propriety. The ultra-respectable, but the condemned anyway. The aggregate appearance is of dignity and dissoluteness. The aggregate voice is a defiant prayer, but the spirit of the whole is processional. The power that is said to all these things that they are damned is dogmatic science, but they'll march. The little harlots will caper, and freaks will distract attention, and the clowns will break the rhythm of the whole with their buffooneries, but the solidity of the procession as a whole, the impressiveness of things that pass and pass and pass, and keep on and keep on and keep on coming. The irresistibleness of things that neither threaten nor jeer nor defy, but arrange themselves in mass formations that pass and pass and keep on passing. So, by the damned, I mean the excluded. But by the excluded, I mean that which will someday be the excluding, or everything that is won't be, and everything that isn't will be. But of course, will be that which won't be. It is our expression that the flux between that which isn't and that which won't be, or the state that is commonly and absurdly called existence, is a rhythm of heavens and hells, that the damned won't stay damned, that salvation only precedes perdition. The inference is that someday our accursed tatterdemalions will be sleek angels. Then the sub-inference is that by some later day, back they'll go whence they came. I think tatterdemalion is like a dirty person dressed in rags, I think. Like, think peasants in Monty Python. That's
Okay.
what it is.
Some lovely filth down here.
That's right. And
So yeah, he's saying that this is like a description of the book. Like all of these
all the
strange
facts.
phenomena come
Yeah.
by like a procession. They just keep coming.
Right.
And in reality, they are there and they keep coming by no matter what, even though we have this like dogmatic view of the world over here.
And by damned, what he means is that they have been excluded
or rejected by science.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's cool. That's very, he's a good writer.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
it's
very
cool. It is our expression.
artistically done.
Yeah, it is our expression that nothing can attempt to be except by attempting to exclude something else. And so when he also talks about himself, is this the second person? I don't know. He says our, but what he means is himself. You know, he'll say,
Oh, instead of saying my.
yeah,
like
instead
what
of
I
saying
do.
my, he says our, like he's talking about himself in the plural.
Well, it's less. What's the word? It's like, it's not as
Possessive? Yeah. I don't know.
Arrogant. You can come off as arrogant in a way, right?
Yeah.
That's not the right word that I'm thinking of. But
Right, but it does make it sound strange. But when he says our and he'll say lots of. He's always talking in the plural, but what he means is like this is how I think about things.
Okay.
Right. So he says it is our expression that nothing can attempt to be except by attempting to exclude something else. That which is commonly called being is a state that is wrought more or less definitely proportionately to the appearance of positive difference between that which is included and that which is excluded. So, and let me preface this whole section by kind of giving an explanation. Having read all this, what he's trying to say is that, and you'll see it comes clear, but what he's saying is that science and people in general will try to say this is a thing by itself. And science does this. We want to isolate a phenomena, right?
Yeah.
Remove as many variables as possible. And he's saying you can't do that, right? Everything is affected by everything else. There's this continuum across phenomena, right? And so that's what he means by included and excluded, okay? So he says, but it is our expression that there are no positive differences, that all things are like a mouse and a bug in the heart of a cheese. Mouse and a bug. No two things could seem more unlike. They're there a week or they stay there a month. Both are then only transmutations of cheese. I think we're all bugs and mice and are only different expressions of an all-inclusive cheese. Or that red is not positively different from yellow. It is only another degree of whatever vibrancy yellow is a degree of, that red and yellow are continuous or that they merge in orange. So then that if, upon the basis of yellowness and redness, science should attempt to classify all phenomena, including all red things as veritable and excluding all yellow things as false or illusory, the demarcation would have to be false and arbitrary because things colored orange, constituting continuity, would belong on both sides of this attempted borderline. Mm-hmm. As we go along, we shall be impressed with this, that no basis for classification or inclusion and exclusion more reasonable than that of redness and yellowness has ever been conceived of. Science has, by appeal to various bases, included a multitude of data. Had it not done so, there would be nothing with which to seem to be. Science has, by appeal to various bases, excluded a multitude of data. Then, if redness is continuous with yellowness, if every basis of admission is continuous with every basis of exclusion, science must have excluded some things that are continuous with the accepted. In redness and yellowness, which merge in orangeness, we typify all tests, all standards, and all meanings of forming an opinion. Or that any positive opinion upon any subject is illusion built upon the fallacy that there are positive differences to judge by. That the quest of all intellection, he likes to make up words too. I'm going to point this out. This is another snake bro thing that he does. That the quest of all intellection has been for something, a fact, a basis, a generalization, law, formula, a major premise that is positive, that the best that has ever been done has been to say that some things are self-evident, whereas by evidence we mean the support of something else. That this is the quest, but that it has never been attained, but that science has acted, ruled, pronounced, and condemned as if it had been attained. So here's this next...
Hold on. Intellection is a word.
Okay.
The act or process of using the intellect, thinking or reasoning.
Okay. Yeah, I looked up most of these to make sure. I'm like, how do I say this, and is this really a word? So he gives another analogy here, which is I think is great in showing, and I think in a lot of cases here, he's talking about problems with language, but because this is how we do classification, he's pointing out the problems here. So he says, what is a house? It is not possible to say what anything is as positively distinguished from anything else if there are no positive differences. A barn is a house if one lives in it. If residence constitutes houseness, see, is that a word? Houseness? Come on. Yeah, because style of architecture does not, then a bird's nest is a house, and human occupancy is not the standard to judge by because we speak of dogs' houses, nor material because we speak of snow houses of Eskimos, or a shell is a house to a hermit crab, or was to the mollusk that made it, or things seemingly so positively different as the White House at Washington and a shell on the seashore are seen then to be continuous.
Interesting, yeah.
I conceive of one intercontinuous nexus in which all seeming things are only different expressions, but in which all things are localizations of one attempt to break away and become real things, or to establish entity or positive difference, or final demarcation, or unmodified independence, or personality or soul, as it is called in human phenomena. That anything that tries to establish itself as real or positive or a real or positive or absolute system, government, organization, self, soul, entity, individuality can so attempt only by drawing a line around itself or about the inclusions that constitute itself and damning or excluding or breaking away from all other things. That is, if it does not so act, it cannot seem to be. That if it does so act, it falsely and arbitrarily and futilely and disastrously acts, just as one would who draws a circle in the sea, including a few waves, and saying that the other waves with which the included are continuous are positively different, and stakes his life upon maintaining that the admitted and the damned are positively different. So like if you stand in the ocean, you draw a circle around yourself, and you say that the waves inside your circle are waves, and the ones outside are totally not waves, are completely different from the waves inside your circle. That's what he's trying to point out, even though they are continuous things.
Yeah.
Our especial interest is in modern science as a manifestation of this one ideal or purpose or process, that it has falsely excluded, because there are no positive standards to judge by, that it has excluded things that by its own pseudo standards have as much right to come in as have the chosen, as opposed to the damned. Our general expression that the state that is commonly and absurdly called existence is a flow or a current or an attempt from negativeness to positiveness and is intermediate to both. By positiveness, we mean harmony, equilibrium, order, regularity, stability, consistency, unity, realness, system, government, organization, liberty, independence, soul, self, personality, entity, individuality, truth, beauty, justice, perfection, and definiteness. That all that is called development or progress or evolution is movement toward or attempt toward this state for which, or for aspects of which, there are so many names, all of which are summed up in the one word, positiveness. At first, this summing up may not seem very readily acceptable. At first, it may seem that all these words are not synonyms, that harmony may mean order, but that by independence, for instance, we do not mean truth, or that by stability, we do not mean beauty or system or justice. But I conceive of one intercontinuous nexus, which expresses itself in astronomic phenomena, in chemic, biologic, psychic, sociologic, that it is everywhere striving to localize positiveness, that to this attempt in various fields of phenomena, which are only quasi-different, we give different names. We speak of the system of the planets and not of their government. But in considering a store, for instance, and its management, we see that these words are interchangeable. It used to be customary to speak of chemic equilibrium, but not of social equilibrium, but that false demarcation has been broken down. And we shall see that by all these words we mean the same state. At everyday conveniences, or in terms of common allusions, of course, they are not synonyms. To a child, an earthworm is not an animal, but it is to the biologist. By beauty, I mean that which seems complete. Obversely, that the incomplete or the mutilated is the ugly. The Venus de Milo. To a child, she is ugly. But when a mind adjusts to thinking of her as a completeness, even though by physiological standards incomplete, she is still beautiful. A hand thought of only as a hand may seem beautiful, but found on a battlefield, obviously a part of something not beautiful. But everything in our experience is only a part of something else that in turn is only a part of still something else. Or that there is nothing beautiful in our experience, only appearances that are intermediate to beauty and ugliness. That only universality is complete, that only the complete is the beautiful, and that every attempt to achieve beauty is an attempt to give to the local the attribute of the universal.
Wow.
All
there's a lot in there.
Yeah. And I'm having to skip giant chunks of this too. Okay, so he says, all attempted organizations and systems and consistencies, some approximating far higher than others, but all only intermediate to order and disorder, fail eventually because of their relations with outside forces. So this part I love because we talk about this on our podcast. We talk about it with Randall on Cosmographia. And Fort is pointing out constantly how science has wanted to view like the Earth itself as being not subject to forces outside the Earth, right? All are attempted completenesses. There's another one. Completenesses, is that a word? Completenesses is? If to all local phenomena there are always outside forces, these attempts too are realizable only in the state of completeness, or that to which there are no outside forces. Scientists who have thought they were seeking truth, and that's truth with a capital T, but who were trying to find out astronomic or chemic or biologic truths. But truth, capital T truth, is that beside which there is nothing, nothing to modify it, nothing to question it, nothing to form an exception, the all-inclusive, the complete. And by truth, capital T truth, I mean the universal. So chemists have sought the true, or the real, and have always failed in their endeavors because of the outside relations of chemical phenomena, have failed in the sense that never has a chemical law without exception been discovered, because chemistry is continuous with astronomy and physics and biology. For instance, if the sun should greatly change its distance from this Earth, and if human life could survive, the familiar chemic formulas would no longer work. A new science of chemistry would have to be learned. Or that all attempts to find capital T truth in the special are attempts to find the universal in the local. And artists and their striving for positiveness under the name of harmony, but they're pigments that are oxidizing or are responding to a deranging environment, or the strings of musical instruments that are differently and disturbingly adjusting to outside chemic and thermal and gravitational forces. Again and again, this oneness of all ideals, and that it is the attempt to be or to achieve locally that which is realizable only universally. In our experience, there is only intermediateness to harmony and discord. Harmony is that besides which there are no outside forces. And nations that have fought with only one motive, for individuality or entity, or to be real, final nations, not subordinate to or parts of other nations, and that nothing but intermediateness has ever been attained, and that history is a record of failures of this one attempt because there are always and always have been outside forces or other nations contending for the same goal. As to physical things, chemic, mineralogic, astronomic, it is not customary to say that they act to achieve truth or entity, but it is understood that all motions are toward equilibrium, that there is no motion except toward equilibrium. Of course, always away from some other approximation of equilibrium. All biologic phenomena act to adjust. There are no biologic actions other than adjustments. Adjustment is another name for equilibrium. Equilibrium is the universal, or that which has nothing external to derange it. But that all we call being is motion, and that all motion is the expression not of equilibrium, but of equilibrating, or of equilibrium unattained, that life motions are expressions of equilibrium unattained, that all thought relates to the unattained, that to have what is called being in our quasi-state is not to be in the positive sense, or is to be intermediate to equilibrium and in equilibrium. Which is like, I feel like that's a long-winded way of saying like everything is trying to reach an equilibrium, and that's true. Like all motions moving.
I love that. Yeah. So I would just add
they're
to that.
all intermediate. Nothing ever reaches it because there's constant outside
That's right.
forces changing things.
But I would add to that too. There's that. Everything is like if you could give it desire, it's trying to reach equilibrium.
Yeah.
By way of the path of least resistance.
Exactly. Yes. That's what I was thinking of, the path of
like
least resistance.
Whenever you see a physical process, you try you apply those principles to it. So cool.
Like those really complicated, is it Rube Goldberg, where the ball is rolling back? It's all path of least resistance, right? It's rolling down and hits the hammer spins around and knocks the bell, and the bell, like that's all path of least resistance.
Yeah.
And you can make very interesting things happen. Okay.
Subject to outside forces. But before the break, a couple of things, if I can remember both of them. One, this reminds me a lot of the Cheng Shen School, Peter Ralston.
Oh, yeah?
This is kind of like introductory material, so I wonder if he's a big Fort fan.
Man, that would be really cool.
Because, the way he's describing all of this stuff and like completeness and I don't know. It just, I can see why the introduction, the guy is saying like, he said he wasn't a philosopher, he was a writer, but there's all this philosophy involved in this. But I love that. That's really cool. And the other thing is, one of the reasons why Richard Feynman is my favorite physicist is because he also looked at the universe in this way. That's you're not, that physicists are trying to remove all the variables that they can to study these phenomena. Yeah. Feynman was always then taking the data from the experiments, removing all of the variables and trying to isolate things, and then reintroducing it to the world picture around him, to the bigger picture. And he would trick other physicists by mentioning, like he would mention to a guy a well-known physical law, like, or maybe something that guy even discovered. Yeah. But he would mention it in a context that was outside of that
experiment,
that narrow view of the action. And the guy would be like, whoa, and like wouldn't even recognize that it was this
that it was his own discovery.
Exactly.
Of course.
He wouldn't tell him. He'd just walk off and be like, see, he doesn't even know.
He doesn't get it. Yeah.
Because they're so I love Feynman's view of the universe because he's always connecting it to everything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's great.
And I read this introduction by Fort probably 4 or 5 times going through to make the notes of this, because I was trying to, I'm trying to catalog in my head what he's using these words to mean, and since this is this guy was writing 100 years ago, there's just,
that's crazy.
There's a little bit, there's a little bit of language weirdness.
Yeah.
And then and this is hard to get across when I'm reading it out loud, but he capitalizes words and then doesn't capitalize them. And then that those mean different things. Like he'll say universality with a capital U, and then later he uses it with a lowercase u. And he's being specific there.
I bet he drove his editors crazy.
Right. Yeah. And lots of dashes and commas and colons and semicolons, but very little periods. Very few periods. The dude does not like to end a sentence. I think this whole introduction is basically 3 sentences.
It's great.
Okay, let's take a break. We are back, ladies and gentlemen, Brothers of the Serpent podcast, and you are listening to is this just like a rough Tangent Cube recording of Green and Blue?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Just Kyle on the guitar, me on the djembe.
Yep, me on the bass.
Oh, yeah, Kyle playing the bass. And this is the Snake Bros Institute for Advanced Coprolite Studies, where there are no degrees, only certificates of ignorance, and we are going through the Book of the Damned by Charles Fort, who I think was one of the original Snake Bros, based on some of the stuff that these people have said about him, how he wouldn't take his own theories seriously.
That's the best part.
He takes the questions seriously, but not the answers, all that stuff. So returning to the book here, and by the way, is this going to be the last segment? I mean, we're already at an hour and a half. We're going to do 2 more segments?
It's up to you, man.
Okay. Well, we'll see if we make it to the end of my notes here.
Well, we had to get caught up on the emails and
of
stuff
course.
too, and do boxes and whatnot.
So continuing with the book. So then, that all phenomena in our intermediate state or quasi-state represent this one attempt to organize, stabilize, harmonize, individualize, or to positivize, or to become real. That only to have seeming is to express failure or intermediateness to final failure and final success. That every attempt that is observable is defeated by continuity, or by outside forces, or by the excluded that are continuous with the included. That our whole existence is an attempt by the relative to be the absolute, or by the local to be the universal. In this book, my interest is in this attempt as manifested by modern science. That it has attempted to be real, true, final, complete, and absolute. That if the seeming of being here in our quasi-state is the product of exclusion that is always false and arbitrary, if always are included and excluded continuous, the whole seeming system or entity of modern science is only a quasi-system or quasi-entity wrought by the same false and arbitrary process as that by which the still less positive system that preceded it, or the theological system, wrought the illusion of its being. In this book, I assemble some of the data that I think are of the falsely and arbitrarily excluded, the data of the damned. I have gone into the outer darkness of scientific and philosophical transactions and proceedings, ultra respectable but covered with the dust of disregard. I have descended into journalism. And I have come back with the quasi-souls of lost data. This also reminds me of forbidden archaeology.
That's exactly what I was thinking too, man.
Covered
what
with
they did, yeah.
He dives into the scientific and philosophical transactions that are ultra respectable, but covered with the dust of disregard.
The other thing that reminded me of that is him pointing out that classification is impossible. And then in the beginning of forbidden archaeology, they pointed out how. Well, no, I'm sorry. It was the hybridization thing.
Yeah.
Trying to classify species when they're changing. They're in flux.
They're in
all the
flux.
time.
That's right. Moving towards equilibrium that can never be attained.
That's right. Because of outside forces.
Forces like the environment is also moving around.
Islands and oceans and all that stuff.
Right.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Love it.
When I say there is nothing to prove, I mean that to those who accept continuity or the merging away of all phenomena into other phenomena without positive demarcations one from another, there is, in a positive sense, no one thing. There is nothing to prove. For instance, nothing can be proved to be an animal because animalness and vegetableness are not positively different.
I see what you mean. He's making up all these words.
There are some expressions of life that are as much vegetable as animal, or that represent the merging of animalness and vegetableness. There is then no positive test, standard, criterion, means of forming an opinion.
Is that like the fins of a fish are kind of like lettuce? Like you got the meat.
Well, like
and you get to crunch on the lettuce.
I was thinking of barnacles, coral. Are these plants or animals? Right? They're sessile, but they act like plants, but they're not plants. They're more animal that you know.
That's a better example.
Yeah. But yeah, fins, fine. Crunchy lettuce. Sure.
The lettuce of fish. It's the fins.
There is nothing to... So, as distinct from vegetables, animals do not exist. There is nothing to prove. Nothing could be proved to be good, for instance. There is nothing in our existence that is good in a positive sense, or as really outlined from evil. If to forgive be good in times of peace, it is evil in wartime. There is nothing to prove. Good in our experience is continuous with or is only another aspect of evil. That theological pronouncements are as much open to doubt as ever they were, but that by a hypnotizing process, they became dominant over the majority of minds in their era. That in a succeeding era, the laws, dogmas, formulas, principles of materialistic science never were proved because they are only localizations simulating the universal, but that the leading minds of their era of dominance were hypnotized into more or less firmly believing them. Newton's three laws, and that they are attempts to achieve positiveness or to defy and break continuity, and are as unreal as are all other attempts to localize the universal. That if every observable body is continuous, mediately or immediately with all other bodies, it cannot be influenced only by its own inertia, so that there is no way of knowing what the phenomena of inertia may be. That if all things are reacting to an infinitude of forces, there is no way of knowing what the effects of only one impressed force would be.
That's great.
That if every reaction is continuous with its action, it cannot be conceived of as a whole, and that there is no way of conceiving what it might be equal and opposite to.
Third body problem.
That's
Three
right.
body problem, yeah.
That's right. Or that Newton's three laws are three articles of faith, or that demons and angels and inertias and reactions are all mythological characters, but that in their eras of dominance, they were almost as firmly believed in as if they had been proved.
Yeah, but it's in the same way as... Well, okay. The idea of inertia is not false either, right? And so it's not that these laws and these things discovered by physicists are not true, but that they may be interpreted beyond their truth, right?
Yeah. Well, and he's also said, like, we've had rants about this in very early episodes, that you don't prove stuff in science, you disprove stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. But what he's pointing out is like, okay, so you have these ideas and people act as though they have been proved, like the existence of angels and demons.
Right.
That were, people assumed that those were true things before the era of science. Now the era of science has its own angels and demons, like the laws of inertia. And people fail to recall that these are like approximations,
right,
that have failed, that we have
Nobody knows
that
what
we have
inertia
yet to
is.
disprove. It doesn't mean they are true, right?
Yeah. Yes, I agree with that. I'm just pointing out that there is truth in these discoveries, but it's not the whole truth,
right? There's
still
too many variables to
That's
say that these are absolute things. That's the other thing he's pointing out. Is like, okay, so Newton says, well, this and that, like an object, a force on an object will cause it to do a certain thing with its inertia. And he's saying, but because there's a billion forces acting on it, all of different strengths, you can never isolate that force and actually prove this to be the case.
Right. Yeah, it's great. That's really cool.
So Fort says, enormities and preposterousnesses. That's exactly preposterousnesses will march. They will be proved as well as Moses or Darwin or Lyell ever proved anything.
Nice.
Except that we substitute acceptance for belief. See, this now he's getting into what he's trying to do. Rather than believing these things are being true, we accept the data, but you don't take the next step of assuming that you can make all these conclusions, right? And again, with we, he's talking about himself. Except that we substitute acceptance for belief. Our methods will be the conventional methods, the means by which every belief has been formulated and supported, or our methods will be the methods of theologians and savages and scientists and children. Because if all phenomena are continuous, there can be no positively different methods. By the inconclusive means and methods of cardinals and fortune tellers and evolutionists and peasants, methods which must be inconclusive if they relate always to the local. And if there is nothing local to conclude, we shall write this book. All sciences begin with attempts to define. Nothing ever has been defined because there is nothing to define. Darwin wrote The Origin of Species, and he was never able to tell what he meant by a species. It is not possible to define. Nothing has ever been finally found out because there is nothing final to find out. It's like looking for a needle that no one ever lost in a haystack that never was. But that all scientific attempts really to find out something, whereas really there is nothing to find out, are attempts themselves really to be something. A seeker of capital T truth. He will never find it, but the dimmest of possibilities, he may himself become capital T truth. Or that science is more than an inquiry, that it is a pseudo-construction or a quasi-organization, that it is an attempt to break away and locally establish harmony, stability, equilibrium, consistency, entity. But dimmest of possibilities, it may succeed. So, then, in general metaphysical terms, our expression is that, like a purgatory, all that is commonly called existence, which we call intermediateness, is quasi-existence, neither real nor unreal, but expression of attempt to become real, or to generate for or recruit a real existence.
Well, hold on, stop.
Okay.
I like to look at science as a method, like we've talked about this plenty of times, not as a thing, right?
Yeah.
Science says, no.
Yeah.
It the way I've learned about it and thought of it is that it's a method, and that methodology is evolving all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But the point...
But it has basic tenets, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The point is to weed out like the subjective aspects, or the influence of desire and all these kind of things that might come into play, and do your best to follow this method that is to remove the things that may be false. Again, right?
Yes.
That's the ultimate idea.
Yeah, to take collections of data and try to...
And even in your practices, right? You, like, remove elements of your own practice that might influence falsely the result.
Yes.
Like in a bad, in a way that isn't what you're, even it can mask itself as something that you think is part of the experiment or whatever.
Right.
So it's deeper than just like, oh, here's the scientific method. Right. It's not just that, because it happens in not only the way you think about stuff, but the way you act. And in the lab, for example, there's all these different things that you try to do to not contaminate something that you're studying or something like that. So there's all this different types of methods in different categories of whatever you're doing. I don't know how to describe it. It's difficult to describe. It's almost like a philosophy.
It is. And I think what Fort has run up against here, and what he's trying to describe is happening in capital S science, which is not the same thing as the scientific method, is a type of confirmation bias that is a negative thing instead of a positive thing, right? Usually when people mean confirmation bias, what they mean is people will look for the data that they want.
Proves what they want to believe, yeah.
What he's saying is that science, capital S, scientists, and in general the scientific world, not the method, but the people, have excluded data that they don't like or that they can't explain, and then they forget about it. It isn't continuously...
And it's not even the single person that forgets about it, but it's generational. It's like lost and forgotten.
That's right. It's dusty disregard.
Yeah.
So what did I just finish reading there? Okay, yeah. So our acceptance is that science, and again, he's saying capital S here, right? Science, though usually thought of so specifically, or in its own local terms, usually supposed to be a prying into old bones or bugs or unsavory messes, is an expression of this one spirit animating all intermediateness, that if science could absolutely exclude all data but its own present data, or that which is assimilable with the present quasi-organization, it would be a real system, with positively definite outlines. It would be real. Its seeming approximation to consistency, stability, and system, positiveness, or realness, is sustained by damning the irreconcilable or the unassimilable. All would be well, all would be heavenly if the damned would only stay damned.
Yeah. So it's like so let's say science is a method for inquiry, and you're looking into a specific subject or a specific idea, even a very narrow, detailed thing. And you collect all this data, and some of it doesn't, you get some data back that you're like, okay, maybe I made a mistake, and you throw it out.
Yeah.
Or you still take notes on it, but you don't include those notes in your own continuation of that inquiry. Because you feel like that was a mistake or whatever, but it's there.
Yeah.
Another form of science could come along and look at what other people doing science were recording on a broader perspective.
Yeah.
And also use the scientific method to weed through those recorded documents, which is what they did in Hidden History of the Human Race.
Yeah.
Is another form, right? Like, let's try to look at all of this data, the discarded, the damned, and the not damned.
Yeah.
And try to weed out themselves for their purpose what might be confirmation bias or whatever.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's like you can have all these different levels of it. You can't expect one scientist to do the big picture on everything.
Right, of course. Right.
So it's just,
I think he's pointing out the difficulties here, right?
Yeah.
That... like we have, and we've talked about this, we have this ongoing compartmentalization of speciality in science because as human knowledge increases, a single person can only learn so much about a particular subject. So there's increasingly narrow focuses.
Yeah.
But he's saying that everything is a continuum. And so these increasingly narrow focuses fail to see a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is a known problem, right?
Yes.
This isn't something that people know this, and like there's constantly questions on how do we fix this problem? How do we have? Can we
generalists?
We need a generalist. Yeah, you need generalists, people who can have deep knowledge on multiple subjects and sort of bring these things together. Have insights that cross disciplines.
It would be cool to see that as like a degree.
Yeah.
The generalist.
Yeah. All right. So that was...
What are you doing today? Digging up of trees. I don't know. Where do you stop with the generalist?
Yeah. All right. So that's the end of Fort's own introduction to the book of the damned.
That's great.
So chapter 2, starting with the anomalies here. In the autumn of 1883, and for years afterward, occurred brilliant colored sunsets, such as never been seen before within the memory of all observers. Also, there were blue moons. I think that one is likely to smile incredulously at the notion of blue moons. Nevertheless, they were as common as were green suns in 1883. Science had to account for these unconventionalities. Such publications as Nature and Knowledge were besieged with inquiries. I suppose in Alaska and in the South Sea Islands, all the medicine men were similarly upon trial. He's pointing out, like, you have the people that are looked to as the knowledge keepers.
Explain this.
Right. Why or what is this green sun? So something had to be thought of. Upon the 28th of August in 1883, the volcano of Krakatoa in the Straits of Sunda had blown up. Terrific. We're told that the sound was heard 2,000 miles away and that 36,380 persons were killed. Seems just a little unscientific or impositive to me. Marvel that we're not told 2,163 miles and 36,387 persons. But the volume of smoke that went up must have been visible to other planets, or tormented with our crawlings and scurryings, the Earth complained to Mars and swore a vast black oath at us. In all textbooks that mention this occurrence, and no exception so far have I read, it is said that the extraordinary atmospheric effects of 1883 were first noticed in the last of August or the 1st of September. That makes a difficulty for us. It is said that these phenomena were caused by particles of volcanic dust that were cast high in the air by Krakatoa. This is the explanation that was agreed upon in 1883. But for 7 years, the atmospheric phenomena continued. Except that, in these 7, there was a lapse of several years. And where was the volcanic dust all that time? You'd think that such a question as that would make trouble. But then you haven't studied hypnosis. You have never tried to demonstrate to a hypnotic that a table is not a hippopotamus. A hippopotamus. According to our general acceptance, it would be impossible to demonstrate such a thing. Point out 100 reasons for saying that a hippopotamus is not a table, and you'll end up agreeing that neither is a table. It only seems to be a table. And well, that's what the hippopotamus seems to be. So how can you prove that something is not something else when neither is something else some other thing? There's nothing to prove. This is one of the profundities that we had advertised in advance. You can oppose an absurdity only with some other absurdity. But science is established preposterousness. We divide all intellection, the obviously preposterousness, and the established. But Krakatoa, that's the explanation the scientists gave. I don't know what whopper the medicine men told.
Why is his name Whopper?
What? No, he's saying he doesn't know what huge lie the medicine men told the people to explain the green suns.
Yes, that's obviously what a Whopper is.
We see from the start the very strong inclination of science to deny, as much as it can, external relations of this earth. This book is an assemblage of data on external relations of this earth. We take the position that our data have been damned upon no consideration for individual merits or demerits, but in conformity with a general attempt to hold out for isolation of this earth. Right, so again, remember the time that he's speaking from. We're very near the period where they have just started to acknowledge that meteors can fall from space. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that the isolationist thing of Earth is a big deal here. So then, with only pseudo-consideration of the phenomena of 1883, or as an expression of positivism in its aspect of isolation or unrelatedness, scientists have perpetrated such an enormity as suspension of volcanic dust 7 years in the air, disregarding the lapse of several years, rather than to admit the arrival of dust from somewhere beyond this earth. Mm-hmm. Not that scientists themselves have ever achieved positiveness in its aspect of unitedness among themselves, because Nordenskjöld, before 1883, wrote a great deal upon his theory of cosmic dust, and Professor Cleveland Abbey contended against the Krakatoan explanation, but that this is the orthodoxy of the main body of scientists. So he's pointing out that two people are dissenting here. You know, and I think it's interesting. So, like, if it's not totally clear, what he's basically saying with this is that we had weird sunsets, green suns, and blue moons, atmospheric effects, for 7 years, starting roughly around the Krakatoa period, but that there was a lapse of several years in the middle of that 7 years.
Right.
And then the green suns and blue moons came back. for a couple of years, right? Everybody sees green suns and blue moons for 3 years, and then there's 2 years lapse, and then there's 2 more years of it. So he's saying, well, where was the volcanic dust supposedly to cause this during that 2-year intermediate period?
Right.
So he says, later we shall have data of things that have gone up in the air and that have stayed up somewhere weeks, months, but not by the sustaining power of this Earth's atmosphere. For instance, the turtle of Vicksburg. It seems to me that it would be ridiculous to think of a good-sized turtle hanging for 3 or 4 months, upheld only by the air, over the town of Vicksburg. When it comes to the horse and the barn, I think that they'll be classics someday, but I can never accept that a horse and a barn could float several months in this Earth's atmosphere. So yeah, these are the turtle and the horse and the barn are things we're going to get to later in the book.
Okay.
But basically they went up and months later they came back down.
Wow. Like in the same place? Or?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
See the report of the Krakatoa Committee of the Royal Society. It comes out absolutely for the orthodox explanation. Absolutely and beautifully and also expensively. There are 492 pages in this report and 40 plates, some of them marvelously colored. It was issued after an investigation that took 5 years. You couldn't think of anything done more efficiently, artistically, authoritatively. The mathematical parts are especially impressive. Distribution of the dust of Krakatoa, velocity of translation and rates of subsidence, altitudes and persistences. And then he lists the annual register of 1883, that the atmospheric effects that have been attributed to Krakatoa were seen in Trinidad before the eruption occurred. In Knowledge, Book 5, page 418, they were seen in Natal in South Africa 6 months before the eruption. So inertia and its inhospitality. Or raw meat should not be fed to babies. We shall have a few data initiatorily. But I fear me that the horse and the barn were a little extreme for our budding liberality. So he's saying, I shouldn't have said that yet. I shouldn't have mentioned the horse and the barn. We're too early in the book. You guys aren't ready for that yet. The outrageous is the reasonable, if introduced politely. Hailstones, for instance. One reads in the newspapers of hailstones the size of hens' eggs, and one smiles. Nevertheless, I will engage to list 100 instances from the monthly weather review of hailstones the size of hens' eggs. There is an account in Nature, November 1st of 1894, of hailstones that weighed almost 2 pounds each. See Chambers' Encyclopedia for 3-pounders. See the report of the Smithsonian Institution in 1870 on page 797 or 479 for 2-pounders authenticated and 6-pounders reported.
Wow.
At
Hen's eggs would not surprise me.
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
we've
But
seen
a 6-pound hailstone, that's pretty big.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree. Hen's eggs wouldn't surprise me.
Not here.
At Seringapatam in India, around the year 1800, fell a hailstone. Well, I fear me, this is one of the profoundly damned. I blurt out something that should perhaps be withheld for several hundred pages, but that damned thing was the size of an elephant.
Wow.
So we laugh. Or snowflakes, the size of saucers, said to have fallen at Nashville, Tennessee, January 24th, 1891, and one smiles. We read of these things and we smile.
That's great.
In Montana, in the winter of 1887, fell snowflakes 15 inches across and 8 inches thick, from the Monthly Weather Review, 1915, page 73. In the topography of intellection, I should say that what we call knowledge is ignorance surrounded by laughter. Black rains, red rains, the fall of thousands of tons of butter. Jet black snow, pink snow, blue hailstones flavored like oranges, punk and silk and charcoal. About 100 years ago, if anyone was so credulous as to think that stones had ever fallen from the sky, he was reasoned with, in the first place, there are no stones in the sky. Therefore, no stones can fall from the sky. Or nothing more reasonable or scientific or logical than that could be said upon any subject. The only trouble is the universal trouble, that the major premise is not real. or is intermediate somewhere between realness and unrealness. In 1772, a committee, of whom Lavoisier was a member, was appointed by the French Academy to investigate a report that a stone had fallen from the sky at Luce. Is that right? Luce in France? Here's another one.
No idea.
I did look this one up too, and I can't remember. Of all attempts at positiveness in its aspect of isolation, I don't know of anything that has been fought harder for than the notion of this Earth's unrelatedness. Lavoisier analyzed the stone of Luce. The exclusionists' explanation at that time was that stones do not fall from the sky, that luminous objects may seem to fall, and that hot stones may be picked up where a luminous object had seemingly landed, but only lightning striking a stone, heating or melting it.
That's what the scientists of the day were saying.
Yes, stones don't fall from the sky, but if one seems to fall from the sky and then you find a stone, a melted stone in the place where it seemed to have landed, is probably a lightning strike.
That's great. Manual for How the Universe Works, final edition.
That's right. But he says the stone of Luce showed signs of fusion. Lavoisier's analysis absolutely proved, this is in quotes, that this stone had not fallen, but that it had been struck by lightning. So, authoritative...
Probably was.
Could be.
I mean, both, right?
Yeah.
Like, they probably found reason to believe, like, oh, yeah, how did they figure out it was struck by lightning? Well, there were heats and, they were ridiculously high.
Yeah, they're looking at
similar
it like it's
to
some kind of
fulgurite.
fulgurite. Yeah,
it's like, it probably was hit by lightning.
but he
on the way
says
down.
they proved that it had not fallen,
No,
but
it did
that it
not.
had been struck by lightning. So authoritatively, falling stones were damned. The stock means of exclusion remained the explanation of lightning that was seen to strike something that had been upon the ground in the first place. That rock has always been there. It just got struck by lightning. And you thought that it fell out of the sky, you peasant.
It's great.
But positiveness and the fate of every positive statement, it is not customary to...
Look at the bones!
Yeah. It is not customary to think of damned stones raising an outcry against a sentence of exclusion, but subjectively, aerolites did, or data of them bombarded the walls raised against them. From Monthly Review in 1796, the phenomenon which is the subject of the remarks before us will seem to most persons as little worthy of credit as any that can be offered. The falling of large stones from the sky without any assignable cause of their previous ascent. See, this is the exclusion he's talking about.
Have to go
they
up
have
first.
to come, seems to partake so much of the marvelous as almost entirely to exclude the operation of known and natural agents. Yet a body of evidence is here brought to prove that such events have actually taken place, and we ought not to withhold from it a proper degree of attention, unquote. So that's a quote from the Monthly Review in 1796. So some scientists were like, look, these accounts can't all be discarded.
Yeah.
So I think it's fantastic that he digs out, and I just imagine Fort, he's got hundreds of shoe boxes full of these little notes. He's reading all these quarterlies and reviews and journals.
He must have had a lot of shoes.
Where did he get all those shoes? I wonder if he made his super checkers boards out of unfolded shoe boxes.
Super checkers.
Super checkers.
At the same time, it's like, I don't like to scoff or make fun of, the beliefs of people in the past that didn't have like technology or weren't raised with so much discovery at their fingertips, right? Like we've obviously we all stand on the shoulders of giants in this aspect.
Yeah.
That it's easy for us to look at this account and laugh at these scientists who thought like, well, the stone would have had to go up first to come down. Mm-hmm. And it's just ridiculous,
it happens, right? A volcanic eruption throws stones in the sky.
Sure.
I guess what I'm saying is I feel like we can laugh, but what we all need...
we're going to laugh.
I know, but we all need to laugh, including these scientists. The thing that they weren't doing was realizing that they laughed at their predecessors, but not themselves.
That's right. That's the point.
And so, we're 100 years in the future from Fort, And we have the same problem. We're laughing at these guys in the 1700s and 1800s, right? But modern people are doing that, but they think that they've got it figured out.
Right.
The point is, and part of the point of this whole podcast, like an overarching theme over all of the episodes, is we have to laugh at what we think now.
That's right.
Because everywhere you looked, you find damned facts.
So you don't laugh at the people in the past and what they thought because you think you know better.
Right. That's right. That's right. No, you laugh because they're just the same as the people now.
That's right. We laugh at them the same way we laugh at ourselves.
Exactly. And I think Fort is doing that also. I just imagine him writing this with a grin on his face because, he's like, you find these reports
and you smile.
And one smiles, right?
That's great.
All right, a few more things here, and then we can wrap it up for this episode. So he says this writer from the monthly review, the writer abandons the first or absolute exclusion and modifies it with the explanation that the day before a reported fall of stones in Tuscany, June 16th, 1794, there had been an eruption of Vesuvius. Or that stones do fall from the sky, but that they are stones that have been raised to the sky from some other part of the Earth's surface by whirlwinds or by volcanic action. So it's more than 120 years later, and I know of no aerolite that has ever been acceptably traced to terrestrial origin. Aerolite being these meteorite things that he's talking about. I think that's a term for them. Stones that fall from the sky.
I'm looking it up.
Aerolite. So falling stones had to be undammed, though still with a reservation that held out for exclusion of outside forces. You find it?
Not yet. Okay, a meteorite composed chiefly of silicates.
Okay.
A body falling through the atmosphere to the Earth from outer space.
Right. One may have the knowledge of a Lavoisier and still not be able to analyze nor even be able to see, except conformably with the hypnosis or the conventional reactions against hypnosis of one's own era. So we believe no more, we just accept.
Lavoisier is the
chemist who decided that stone had been hit by lightning, despite what all the reports said. Didn't come out of the sky. The dude was a renowned chemist, did great work, but because the concept in his era was that stones don't fall from the sky, he went there and, quote unquote, proved that it had just been hit by lightning.
Yeah. The same way so many of the scientists proved that the bones or artifacts weren't artifacts or were from a different sediment layer and all that kind of stuff in Hidden History of the Human Race.
Yes.
It's the same stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. So, yeah, this is great. This is going to be a great book report.
I love it so much. I'm so glad to be in a book. Very cool. And this was kind of a last resort because, right, we were planning on doing...
I wanted to do Hamlet's Mill first. I mean, I've been wanting to do the Book of the Damned forever. It wasn't a last resort. It was just we had two options. My plan was to do Hamlet's Mill and then do Book of the Damned, but I couldn't find a good digital version of Hamlet's Mill that I could use. Like, PDFs don't help.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, because you need to be able to...
Right. So I'd rather either I need to get it in my Kindle app or I need to have a physical copy, which is how we did Gods of Eden. I had a physical copy of the book, and that's how we've done the Missing 411 stuff. So, I don't want a PDF. I can't do the...
We can always print a PDF.
We could print it out.
You just down here shuffling papers.
But I just purchased a physical copy. It should be here in a week, And then so when we finish Book of the Damned, we can do whatever and have a couple shows on whatever, and then we'll dive back into it.
Ann can send us some macaroni boxes to mark up the book with.
That's right.
Love you, Ann.
All right. I did see people signing up to the Patreon. Thank you guys so much for the report, for the support. There is a support page on the website. Check it out, brothersoftheserpent.com. That's where all the podcast-related stuff is. If you want to email us, get a hold of us, brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com. I read every email that we get. I can't read them all on the show. Can't possibly do that, but I do read them all personally. But I like to respond to them on the show. But if you're writing me an email asking me questions that you're expecting me to answer, if I don't answer either on the show or in an email, then that means the answer is no. I only write back if the answer is yes. So yes, thank you guys so much. Thanks to History Shift for making all of our YouTube videos. And we had them on the last episode. I hope you guys enjoyed that. It was a lot of fun for us. And join the Discord. You can find links to that on the website as well. I think we have like 1,000 members in there now. We crossed the 1,000 mark. 1K members in the Discord. And they're, of course, from all over the planet, countries all over the world. The admins are trying to make a list so I can say there's people from 25 different countries. Or whatever.
Oh, wow.
I don't know yet. We haven't gotten that far, but it's a good idea. So, but join up the Discord. Lots of snakes in there, lots of topics. And the version, like I said, that I'm reading, I bought on Kindle. It's available on Amazon. It's a digital version of all four of Fort's books. But if you're interested in listening to an audiobook version, the Grimerica guys have published an Audible version of all four of these books. So if you want to do that, I'll post links in the show notes of how to go buy it from them. I brought this up as my idea. I was like, we should do Book of the Damned. I'll read it. And they were like, hell yeah. And then I'm slow. I never got around to it. So Graham read all four books and Darren just told me. I was like,
awesome.
Hey, I'm going to do Book of the Damned. And Darren's like, oh, Graham already did it. I'm like, Anyway, so it's available.
They get on it.
Yeah. I'll put the link in the show notes if you guys want to listen to it. All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Yep. We love you guys.
Always have.
Always will.
Good night, Adamu.
Get back to work.